How would you respond to somebody maybe coming against the sort of idea of Lutheran confessions being equivalent with Scripture and authority?
Yeah, sure. This is a good question. I know that the Lutheran theologian Charles Kraus, who has a book called The Conservative Reformation and His Theology, I believe it was him that at one point said, as soon as you believe that Scripture teaches something that is not in the Lutheran confessions, but still hold to that doctrine, you are no longer a Lutheran. And he says that because it is the Lutheran principle ultimately that we do go back to Scripture as the ultimate authority. With that being said, so we're not setting up the confessions as some higher authority or equal authority to Scripture. With that being said, within the Lutheran tradition, there are two views in terms of how our confessional documents are viewed. One is the quia subscription, one is the quatenus subscription. So the distinction between those terms is quia means because, or it's this idea that we believe in the confessions because they agree with Scripture. Quatenus means insofar as, and this view says we agree with the confessions insofar as they agree with Scripture. Now, here's the problem with that insofar as, or that quatenus subscription, because on the one hand, it sounds nice because it says, well, Scripture is a higher authority. We can correct the confessions with Scripture, and that sounds all well and good in terms of our view of sola scriptura and things like that. But the thing is, anyone can hold to any confession and say we hold to it insofar as it agrees with Scripture. I mean, I could say I agree with the Book of Mormon insofar as it agrees with Scripture, because when it agrees with Scripture, it's right. So to do that with a confession kind of negates the point of the confession. Yeah. So for a Lutheran to hold to a quia subscription to the Book of Concord is not to say that it has the same authority as Scripture, but is to say that we believe that what is taught when it's making these doctrinal points throughout, we believe that it is teaching what Scripture teaches. So it is a norm, but it is a normed norm. Okay, so Scripture norms all other authorities in the church. Now, we have accepted the Lutheran confessions as an authority because we believe that they consistently teach what Scripture itself says. Okay, but that doesn't mean we don't do things like, it doesn't mean that every statement in the entire Book of Concord is always correct at all times. What we're talking about is, in terms of the theological points and controversies that are going on, we believe they explain them correctly in accord with Scripture. We don't believe, for example, there's a statement that says that, garlic demagnetizes magnets, which people point out. Like whether that's right or not. It doesn't.
I wasn't expecting that to come into our conversation today.
That was not the biggest.
I know. Yeah, it's a little weird, but or like not as weird of an example, but Saint Prosper of Aquitaine's book, The Call of All Nations, is cited in the Apology of the Augsburg Confession, and it's said that Saint Ambrose wrote it. We know that Saint Ambrose didn't write it. Does that mean because I'm a Lutheran, so we're not treating it like Scripture, right? We're not saying that like it's inerrant in every historical and scientific thing that it says. We're saying that when it's dealing with those doctrinal controversies, which are the reason that it's written, what it says on those doctrinal issues is we believe what Scripture ultimately teaches on those issues.
Let's be fair with this. There's other denominations out there that have 16 fundamental truths, and if you want to be a part of their denomination, pastor in their churches, and/or be members, to really be a part of their denomination, you have to adhere to those 16 fundamental truths. Now, they would acknowledge that people outside of their denomination are saved and Christian brothers who love the Lord, but they are not within their denomination. You're just suggesting that the confessions are that for Lutherans. They are the statements of faith to be Lutheran. It's not to be Christian. Now, you do believe that they are true, or else you wouldn't believe them. Is that fair?
Yeah. We're not saying that you have to believe in the Lutheran confessions to be saved. We're not trying to
justification by Lutheran confession.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So no, of course not. So we're saying that, and this is an issue of, when you're calling a pastor to a congregation, right? You want to know that the pastor is going to teach what you think is scriptural.
Right.
And so if you're a church that has certain views, if you look at Luther's Small Catechism and the Augsburg Confession, which are the two kind of primary documents for Lutheran churches, this is what all the people in the church believe Scripture teaches. You're not going to be too happy if a pastor comes in and says, well, I believe that only believers should be baptized, and I'm going to stop baptizing your infants. Right. In a congregation that believes that's biblical, you can't do that. So and it would be the same case the other way around. I'm sure if a pastor came into a Baptist church and said, I'm going to start baptizing all your babies, they probably wouldn't be too happy either. So To some degree, we have to do that. And I think every church has, whether you've written it down or not, like
Right.
you've got a confession of faith. It
Right.
just depends on, like, are you aware of it and writing it down or not?
Right.
Because even those churches that claim that they have no creeds, they've still got stances on things very
Right.
clearly.